It's a Scream, baby. It's a Scream. Let's get into it. My channel. Hope you're all doing well out there. Today I'm coming to you from my son's room. It's a mess here in North Carolina today. A lot of sleet and freezing rain in my area, so we're all stuck in the house, and my son is playing video games up in his playroom where I normally would film my reviews. So it's really loud, so I'm coming to you a little handheld action from my son's room. We're going to do a deep dive, spoiler-filled review on Scream 2022. But before we get into it, like, comment, subscribe, join me here. I greatly would appreciate that. Click on the little notification bell. That way, every time I upload a video, you'll get notified. You can see what the hell's going on over here. Now, let's talk about Scream, baby. Scream 2022. This film, Scream 4, came out in 2011. It didn't light the box office on fire like the previous three films. So, I mean, there was a new trilogy planned based off of that film. And I really like Scream 4. I'm going to do a ranking video later this week. But it just didn't light the box office on fire. Matter of fact, that one made total in America $38 million. From what I saw box office reports today, the new one's going to open up for the 4-day weekend with almost as much as that made in its whole theatrical run. So I would assume we're going to get another Scream sequel, which I'm happy about because I did enjoy this film. As I said the other night on my out of the theater reaction to it. Now, Wes Craven passed in 2015, so he's obviously was unable to come back and be a part of this. And he directed the first four films. But in this one, they got a new directing team. So you'll see me looking down a little bit because I got some notes here because it's hard to remember all this stuff, especially as you get a little bit older. But the directing duel that brought us Ready or Not came in, which made me excited because I was a little bit worried about this, where they were going to go. And Kevin Williamson came back as executive producer. So this film was directed by Matt Benatelli Open and Tyler Gillette. Yes, they brought us Ready or Not, which I absolutely love that film. This movie's an hour and 54 minutes, and it's rated R like the rest of the films. Now, thank goodness Kevin Williamson was still around because Kevin Williamson obviously wrote the first two. He came back to write the fourth one, and I'm sure he was involved in this one, at least to the point where giving some advice and whatnot. I know he didn't write the script, but at least he was there as a guideline. And you could really tell during this film that Wes Craven was definitely, they were trying to pay tribute to Wes Craven and what has come before. They definitely do not disrespect the past, which I absolutely appreciated as a big-time horror fan and a fan of the Scream franchise in general. Now, cast-wise, old legacy characters. We got Neve Campbell back as Sidney Prescott. Obviously, if you saw the trailer, you know she's back. Courtney Cox is back as Gale Weathers. Not Gale Weathers Riley. They are divorced in this film. And David Arquette is back as Dewey. And this is probably, even though I've always been a fan of the Dewey character, actually, this is probably my favorite performances from David Arquette as the character of Dewey. Now on to some of our new cast members. We got Melissa Barra as Sam Carpenter. Nice little shout out to John Carpenter. We got Jenna Ortega as Tara Carpenter. They are sisters in the film, although they're a little bit of estranged, and we'll get into that. Jack Quaid, yes, Dennis Quaid's son. It plays Richie in this film. Dylan Minnette plays Wes. A nice shout out to Wes Craven, and he is Marley Shelton's character, Judy Hicks, who's the sheriff now, her son, and she's not married. She's a single mom. And there's a lot more of the new cast. And I gotta be honest, the new cast, I dig it. But from the commercial, I'm gonna tell you up front, they make it seem like the legacy characters are in, or the majority, or the story is focused on them. The story is not focused on the legacy characters. Yes, they are here. And I gotta say, they do a good job of giving them a reason to be here. But they are not our main focus. I mean, Neve Campbell's only in this film maybe 10 minutes. Maybe a little bit longer. Gale Weathers, Courtney Cox's character, maybe gets 15. Dewey gets the most screen time and probably the most to do here. Even though we'll talk about that in a couple minutes. Now, at the beginning of this film, we get the patented Scream opening. We get Tara is home by herself, and she still has a landline. I'm assuming that's her mother's idea because my parents still have a landline. I know some people that still have a landline. We don't have a landline anymore because there's really no reason for it. But I saw some people making comments, why the hell does she have a landline? And I saw people joking like that's probably the most frightening thing, that they actually have a landline. So we get the patented call from the killer. Now, they do something a little cool with this in the beginning. And Roger Jackson was back to do the voice of Ghostface. The conversation starts out more cordial because at first she thinks it's her mother's boyfriend. So they just start talking about movies and their likes and this and that. Like almost like he's taking an interest in her to get to know her because he hasn't met her yet. We find out that her mom has a drinking problem. And then slowly the voice starts to turn. And actually, even my buddy Dale said the same thing. It sounded like Wes Craven's voice coming over the phone. And if that's what they tried to do, I don't know if that was on purpose or it was just us projecting that. If that's what they did on purpose, that was fantastic, and I loved it because it sounded like Wes Craven's voice at first, but slowly the voice starts changing into the voice we know as Ghostface, and I thought that was really well done the way they change it like that. So yes, Tara gets attacked by Ghostface. Now she survives though, so that's the difference in most of these films. Everybody gets killed. She actually lives on, although they say how she was stabbed 7 times. It's a pretty damn good, effective opening, and the cops even show up while Ghostface is still in the house. Now obviously Ghostface gets away. Then we're introduced to Sam. She ran away. She kind of left home. She's living in Modesto, California. And we meet her boyfriend, Richie, and she gets a phone call from one of Tara's friends that she got attacked the night before. So her and her boyfriend go back to Woodsboro. And we get reintroduced to Dewey. He's living in a trailer, looking a little worse for wear. They hint that he was an alcoholic. And I saw an interview after the screening we saw at the Alamo Draft House in Raleigh. There was a Q&A afterwards, a live Q&A with David Arquette, one of the directors, and Kevin Williamson. And David Arquette even said one of the things he asked for them to change, where they showed Dewey drinking a lot, like he was an alcoholic. They only hint at it in the film. He asked to change that because he didn't think it was right for the character. They hint at it. They didn't need to show it. I got that he's had a rough life. He's not the sheriff anymore. He goes into saying that they asked him to step down, and they gave it to Judy. And he calls Sydney, and that's where we first see Sydney a little bit in the beginning. He's just letting her know it was a murder and to keep her eye out. And then he texts Gail Weathers because they're not married anymore, but he watches her every morning on her morning show from New York or LA. I don't know what city she's in. That's not really important to the story, really, besides the fact that they're not together anymore. And Sam gets back to Woodsboro, and she goes to the hospital to visit her sister. And here's one thing, when I saw it, I was like, what the hell's going on? She has a vision of Billy Loomis, although all messed up Billy Loomis from the end of Scream 1. Now, while it was cool to see Billy back and Skeet Ulrich back in that role, although I don't know if it was CGI or he actually did come back and they just de-aged him. It was cool, but I was like, what? Now, it shows you what's to come because, like they always say, Randy's rules, we always got to go back to the original. They definitely pull things from the original here for this story to make sense or to get to the final conclusion. And she comes clean that she knew she was Billy Loomis's daughter, where she was going through some boxes her mom had in the attic while she was around 14 when she was starting to act out, and she found out that Billy Loomis, her mom had a relationship with Billy Loomis, and that was actually her real father, not the father that was living there. And she blames herself for their father leaving. That's why she left and pushed her family away. And Tara is less than sympathetic and kicks her out of the room. Meanwhile, Ghostface, we get some really cool, intense kills. It's a brutal film, just like the other ones. I don't think this is any more brutal than Part 4. Part 4, if you watch that again, is pretty freaking gory and pretty brutal. Although the kills are, and the killer's brutal in this film, no doubt, and there's a lot of blood. I just don't think, I saw some people saying this is the most brutal one. No, I think Part 4 and the first one are probably the 2 most brutal ones, but that's, who cares? That doesn't really matter. Just to get through this review a little bit more, obviously we set up red herring after red herring, and even the friends, they do the meta thing, obviously, and they comment about elevated horror like the Babadook and Hereditary and stuff like that. And the killer, even like in the beginning with Tara, even says, well, what about, Friday the 13th and Halloween and, these classic slasher films. And so it definitely looks in on what the state of horror is right now. And even the idea of a requel, where just like they did Halloween, where they kind of ignored the sequels and make a direct sequel to the original film so they could bring back legacy characters and tie in off of the popularity of what kicked it all off. And they even hint at like The Force Awakens, stuff like that, and other films like that. And a lot of horror franchises have, although Halloween's probably the most notable one, that just kind of ignored the sequels, although they do pay homage to them. It's basically just, they're just jumping off of the first film, which, once a franchise runs 20, 30, 40 years, what else can you do if you're trying to do something a little newer? Although, keep it grounded to the first film, you got to get rid of some of the baggage that the sequels bring. Even if you like some of the sequels, which I do like some of the sequels in the Halloween franchise, but I think they did the right thing here. And even this film, honestly, to do some homework before you get into this film, I'd watch the first one and the fourth one. I'm not saying they ignored the second and the third one, but the first one and the fourth one are the ones that really tie in, or they probably reference even more so because Judy Hicks was in the fourth one and she's back in this one. But really, the first film and this film feel like they they're tied together very closely, because Billy Loomis coming back, Sam seeing his visions of him, and then at the end, the whole final act of this movie takes place in Stu's house from the original film because they're having a party, and Amber, Tara's friends, having this big party, and all this stuff is I skipped over one thing. Dewey gets killed in the hospital. Tara's in the hospital. Sam and Dewey go to the hospital to get her sister, because they realize the killer's going after her. And Dewey has this battle with the killer in this hallway, and he goes back to finish him off, and he gets killed for real this time. And it was definitely well earned. I didn't think that I knew in my head, I knew they had to kill off a legacy character, at least one. I was thinking two, but at least one. I didn't think Dewey would be the one. I thought they were going to kill Gale off, or Dewey and Gale. But Dewey does go out properly. They do play proper respects to that character, and I appreciate the way they handled it. It was definitely an emotional moment for a character that's been with us since the beginning. I know it became kind of a running joke how many times Dewey got stabbed and survived, especially to the first two films. But this one, there's no coming back. They do show Randy's sister that we met in the third one. She has two kids that are a big part of this film. They're part of this group of friends. And the daughter is like Randy. She knows all about horror movies, and she knows all the rules, and they go back through some of the rules and some new rules. So it's definitely very meta. So it definitely looks in on itself while also pushing the story forward. And like I said, the last act takes place at Amber's house, at Stu's original house. And it's a very effective last act. It's very suspenseful. A lot of people get killed or attacked. And then when the reveal happens, I was surprised. It wasn't what I was expecting. It's not who I expected it to be. Although the girl, Amber, is one of the killers. There's two killers, like in the original film. Jack Quaid's character is the other one. But the girl who plays Amber in this film played one of the Manson chicks in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. As soon as I seen her on film, I'm like, is she going to be one of the killers? And she ends up being one of the killers. And she is fantastic. This chick plays crazy like a fucking rock star. She's fantastic as a batshit crazy person. Jack Quaid is really good here too. Once he flips the switch and we realize he's the other killer, he does a good job of bringing that crazy energy like Billy and Stu did in the original film. I'm not saying they're as good, but they do bring it. And the ending is batshit crazy, although Amber gets killed a lot and as soon as it happened, I'm like, are they doing the same thing as in the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood? Because she gets lit on fire. And then she gets shot then. But she gets lit on fire just like her character at the end of Once Upon a Time. I'm like, this seems very familiar, but still cool. I was there for it. I was there for it, definitely. And that's how the film ends, with Sam stabbing the shit out of, she sees Billy Loomis standing there and he's giving her the nod because there's a knife by the one wall and Jack Quaid's character didn't see it, and she grabs it and she just unloads on him and stabs him like 20 fucking times. And then he ends up getting killed, and they kill her, and that's the end of the film, where Tara and Sam make amends, and Gale and Sydney are still alive, although Gale took some damage and so did Sid. And that's the end of Scream 2022. Now, they do set up, I don't know if this is what's going to happen, but obviously Sam has some mental problems, and she's taking medication for it. They could easily turn her into a killer in the sequel, which would be kind of cool, considering she's a heroine here, and end up making her the killer in a further sequel. I would dig it. I would be there for it and be a little different. But obviously she's haunted by the fact that Billy Loomis was her father, and it bugs her. So I could see them doing that. I don't know if that's what's going to happen. It's speculation on my part. But overall, I think the film was strongest with the new cast. I think they were all very good. And the legacy characters, even though they are not the center focus of the story, are very good, and they're always welcome back. I mean, they've been with us since '96, since the first film, and they're just as good here as they were through all these movies. They just don't get as much to do here. The new cast, if the new cast didn't work, this movie would fall apart. The directors keep the pace moving. They do a nice job giving props to Wes Craven, showing respect to Wes Craven, and even at the end of the film, after the last scene, it says 4 West before the credits roll. I thought that was really sweet and very respectful to a man who is huge in the horror genre. He was a big deal. I mean, he made some of the most sentimental horror films of all time, and to pay respects to him like that and show how much they care about paying respects to him was a beautiful thing, and I appreciated that as a horror fan and a big Wes Craven fan. Like, again, the Ghostface is awesome. Roger Jackson sounds amazing as Ghostface once again. They do a lot of misdirection with the scares, especially one scene with Wes in the house after Judy Hicks gets killed in a pretty cool scene. They do a lot of misdirection on where the scare or the killer is going to come from, and I appreciated it because they show you things that you would expect we've seen in other horror films, like Scream always has, but they give you something totally different of what your expectations are. So I appreciated that. I did have some problems with it. The Billy Loomis flashback, how did she know what he looked like when he got stabbed by Sydney and shot? That's kind of okay, how would she know unless she saw photos or whatever? I think the last act at the Stew House, for how much I like it, there's a few moments of clunkiness that I didn't really understand. Amber is all in, and she is so aggressive, and she even says how she's the one that killed Dale. But she dicks around with killing them at the end, and it didn't make much sense to me. Like, she's standing there more worried about giving exposition than killing them when she was so aggressive earlier. That kind of bugged me a little bit. It was like, get on with it, girl. You're like all in on going batshit crazy, and you're dicking around giving these lines of dialogue that you obviously proved you don't give a shit if these people live or die. I just thought it was a little clunky. I still enjoyed the ending. I think it's a really strong ending. I just think there was too much dicking around considering how aggressive this killer has been throughout the whole film. So those are some of my minor problems. I really did enjoy this film. I think it's a really strong Scream sequel. I really enjoyed it. I would still stick with my 8.5 out of 10 rating. Yes, 8.5 out of 10 for Scream 2022. If you're a Scream fan or a horror fan, I highly recommend checking this film out. Check it out in theaters. I think you're going to enjoy yourself. But yes, 8.5 out of 10 for Scream 2022. Have you seen it yet? Leave a comment down below. Let me know. Hit the thumbs up. Hit the subscribe button. Share this video. I would appreciate that. I'll be back later in the week with a Scream ranking video. But until then, bye.